All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am so pleased to be the first one to welcome everyone to our presentation, Voting Rights and People with Disabilities. This event is intended to shed light on how to register to vote and cast your ballot, as well as discussing accessible tools and options for people with disabilities during the election process. We hope by the end of this session, you'll know more about your rights as a voter and how to make your voice heard. So my name is Elena. I do outreach with Arapahoe Libraries, and I also coordinate our Library for All program. I use she, her, and hers pronouns. And I will be serving as a moderator for this event along with my colleague, Richard Lyda. Rich, would you please take a second to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Elena. My name is Richard Lyda. I work at Arapahoe Libraries in the Mobile Library Services Department, and we're really pleased to be hosting and co-hosting this event with you all today.
Thank you so much. So Rich and I will be keeping an eye on the chat, answering any questions that come up, so please reach out if something does come up. I will introduce you to some of our experts with our partner organizations very soon. But for now, I want to acknowledge and thank those partner organizations. So Disability Law Colorado, Alliance, the ARC of Arapahoe and Douglas counties, and Developmental Pathways. Thank you so much for making this event possible and for the great work that you do in communities every day. So I have just a few housekeeping things to let you know about before I turn the floor over to our experts. First, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are going to be video recording this session. That's so folks who are not able to join us live can access it later, and hopefully that will also be a good tool, a good reference for those of you who are joining us live. If you have any questions or concerns about the video recording, please reach out to Rich or myself, and we will do our best to help you get that sorted out. All participant cameras and microphones will be off for the session. So we encourage you to make lots of use of the Q&A and chat features on Zoom. And again, Rich and I will be monitoring that. You're welcome to ask questions anytime you have them. So this morning's session will be split up into two parts. So first we'll hear a presentation on voting rights. And then second, we'll have a question and answer session with that panel of experts. We expect to end right about 11:15 this morning. So to get started, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Jennifer Levin. Jennifer is an attorney as well as the education team leader for Disability Law Colorado, and Jennifer uses she, her, and hers pronouns. She will pause from time to time during her presentation to ask for questions, but again, please don't feel like you need to wait for that to happen to put your question into the chat or the Q&A. So Jennifer, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Elena. So as Elena mentioned, I am an attorney with Disability Law Colorado, and I have been working here for about 11 years. I started my career here mainly because of my son, who at the time was about 5 years old and had been diagnosed with autism. And I started kind of getting involved with the school district and what his services should look like. So that sort of pushed me out into this world of disability rights and education, and voting somehow kind of got slipped into my career path too, which I really love. This is my favorite part of my job because it's the part where I get people excited about participating in elections. And I think you know that right now the election is going to be a huge deal, and who you vote for will have an enormous impact on your rights. Ruth Bader Ginsburg just passed away, and I know that may seem like it's not really related to politics, the Supreme Court justice, but it is. Right now, we have a president in power who's more conservative than, say, Joe Biden if he were to be elected. So based on conservative political beliefs, we may end up with a Supreme Court justice who could impact your rights as a human being, your right to choices, reproductive choices, possibly even benefit rights such as health care. So who you vote for is going to impact your life in so many different ways. So it's awesome that y'all are here getting this information and really going to go out there and vote and express your opinion in that way, because it's going to have such a huge impact. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen so you can see what the PowerPoint I have is going to talk about. So give me just a second here. Okay, let's see. All right, so we're just going to go through the voting rights and registration basics so that you have the tools you need, just get out there and get registered and vote. And as soon as you can, I would suggest you do it within our early time frame. We do have a 2-week voting period rather than just election day. You can vote 2 weeks in advance of election day. So all of these rights that you have are going to kick in starting, oh gosh, I want to say October 26th. I should have written that down. It might be the 25th. Peg is going to know the answer to that because she's our election expert. But you have 2 weeks before November 6th to get that vote out. I want to talk a little bit about what Disability Law Colorado does for people with disabilities, and then I'll go into your rights, the rights that are protected under various federal and state laws, registration requirements, voting, voter identification requirements, how to become an election judge or watcher, because we want to encourage everybody out there to participate in the election process. And becoming an election judge or a watcher or poll monitor are great ways to do that. And we want to hear what people with disabilities have to say about our election process. Then we'll go through a couple of scenarios and how you would file a complaint if you feel like your rights have been infringed, or if you feel like you've been disenfranchised, which essentially is not allowed to vote. So Disability Law Colorado protects and promotes the rights of people with disabilities through legal representation. So we might take on an individual case and go file a lawsuit for that person. And we work in various programs. Like I mentioned before, I do people with special needs who are in school. So I could represent a student with an IEP or a 504 plan and a complaint against the school district. We have programs where attorneys represent people with employment discrimination issues, housing discrimination, public accommodation discrimination. We also have programs where people are in facilities and we are working towards getting them into the community. And that's under a Supreme Court case ruling under the Olmstead Act that it makes that possible for people and makes it illegal to keep people institutionalized when they could have access to their community in a lesser restrictive environment. So we do legal advocacy in that sense. We also do investigations into allegations of abuse and neglect. So if you are in a state facility or public school, anything that is funded by the state and serves people with disabilities, if there's an allegation of abuse and neglect, our organization has the authority under federal mandate to go and request records, to interview people, to monitor the site, and then file litigation eventually if it's necessary. So that's something important to keep in mind. If you do sense there is any abuse or neglect going on in a facility that serves people with disabilities, please feel free to give us a call and we can determine whether or not we could investigate that situation. And we do things like this, like outreach and trainings. And that's the fun part of my job, obviously. So there are so many election laws that protect people with disability, which is just a huge indication as to, how important your right to vote is, are all of these laws that provide so many different ways to ensure your access to an election is equal to those without disabilities. First, there's the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which enables a person who needs assistance in voting to have someone of their choice assist them. The Voting Accessibility for the Elderly and Handicapped Act of 1984 allows people over the age of 64 and people with physical limitations to request a remote or a mail ballot. That's not necessarily a law here in Colorado that we need to depend on, but several states do, because not all states have a mail ballot election like we do. The Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990 is the ADA and probably the most significant piece of law that protects people with disabilities, and it would enable people to have that equal access to an election so that they can vote in the same manner as their non-disabled voters do. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 is known as the Motor Voter Law, because if you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, you are automatically asked if you would like to register to vote. But that doesn't just apply to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Any agency that provides a service to people with disabilities is also required to request that you ask if you would like to register to vote, including services under Medicaid and Medicare. The Help America Vote Act of 2002 was passed in response to an election from the year 2000, Bush v. Gore, where there was an issue with voting equipment down in Florida, and they couldn't get the right count. And so Al Gore contested the results and went to the Supreme Court over that, and as he lost, and George Bush became our president. But as a result of that, we had some legislation passed, which HAVA, which now requires all voting and service and polling centers or precincts have an accessible voting machine so that people can vote independently and privately, which is a huge deal because not everybody with a disability was able to do that in the past. If you needed assistance, that's not exactly an independent or private voting experience. The person assisting you is going to know who you're voting for. And that can be a problem sometimes because sometimes people might manipulate the voter to vote in a way that they would prefer the voter vote, which is not acceptable. So Help America Vote Act makes it possible that a person can now vote independently and privately on an accessible machine. And then we have Colorado's election law, which most recently was upgraded in a very big way in 2013 and provides a lot of, it removes a lot of barriers to voting. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, our own law, because that's the most important thing you need to know living here in Colorado. So are there any questions up to this point? I was going to ask Elena if she could check the chat box.
So we don't have any open questions. We did have a question about kind of how we would vote and if I'm in the UK, can I still vote? So Luke responded to that. If you're a US citizen, you will want to contact your local state's electoral office. It can inform you how you can vote and what is called absentee voting. So Jennifer, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They would be considered an overseas voter, and they can request that ballot and get it earlier than the rest of us. And so, yes, very good advice, Luke. Go contact your clerk, and that way you can get your ballot. And they can send that to you online, and just depending on your circumstances, you have several ways of returning your ballot. You may not have to use the mail, just depending on your circumstances. So your rights under the law, and these are going to be laws that are specific to Colorado as well as federal rights. But here in Colorado, we're a little unique. You have the right to vote if you have a guardian. We're one of 11 states in the country that does not restrict your right to vote based on your mental capacity or based on the fact that you have a guardian. So I like to stress this piece of information just because there is a lot of confusion in our state over that. I think because many other states do restrict those rights. So just to eliminate that confusion, just if nothing else, go home knowing that if you know someone with a guardian or if you have a guardian, you still have the right to vote. You have the right to vote if you have diminished mental capacity due to age. So maybe even you don't have a guardian. If you have dementia or Alzheimer's, anything that's impacting your ability to remember things, you still have the right to vote. A lot of family members and people who live in nursing homes and their caretakers in the nursing home make these assumptions that because the voter wants to vote, the person might make the assumption of, well, they're in the memory care unit, they don't get to vote. We've had that come to our office as a legitimate complaint, where election workers actually call and tell us they were turned away by long-term care facilities because the voters receiving the ballots were in the memory care unit. That's absolutely incorrect, and it's a crime to prevent an election worker from doing their job. So it's important to remember that. If you know anyone in long-term care, please make sure that they do get that ballot and that they get the assistance they need to mark the ballot and get it turned in. If you have mental or intellectual or developmental disabilities, you absolutely have the right to vote. If you want to vote, and you can express your intent on who you want to vote for, you can vote. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, you have the right to vote independently and privately. So, and also, if you want assistance, you can get that assistance. So the person assisting you can be anybody that you choose. They don't have to be a registered voter or, someone eligible to vote. It could be anybody you would like, or a poll worker can help you vote. If you have a felony in this state, also unique to Colorado and some other states, but not many, if you have a felony and you've served the time for the felony, you can vote. If you are on parole for that felony, you can vote. That's a recent change in our statute, so that's something good to know. If you know anyone on parole, they've served the time for their felony, they can still vote, and they should get their registration updated. So each voting service and polling center must have an accessible voting machine, like I mentioned before. And what that would look like is an accessible voting machine should have the ability to adapt to assistive technology equipment. So if you use a sip and puff, paddles, or some kind of a switch device, or if you need a machine to go up in volume because you might have a hearing impairment, or if you have visual impairment and the machine should increase font size for you, it should be able to do different contrasts on the screen so that you can read it more clearly. That's what these machines should be able to do. They should be up and running in every voting service and polling center that you go to. So when you get there, someone should be able to put the machine up in place for you and understand how it operates as well. The voting service and polling center that you go to has to meet the ADA standards for physical accessibility. So in order to become a voting service and polling center in Colorado, you must have a survey filled out that the Secretary of State will consider before announcing this as a voting service and polling center. So that's one of the good things about our law, our most recent 2013 legislation. It did create these voting service and polling centers, and they are required to be accessible. Previous to that, we had more precincts, but they were not always accessible physically because they were in older school buildings or old churches, things like that. But now we're seeing the buildings are more accessible, and that's no longer a huge complaint, which is a great news. There are fewer, which is not always convenient for people, but just plan ahead. If you want to vote in person, you may need to get a ride or figure out how to use our public transportation to get to that place. So registration forms, ballots, and other materials must be made available in alternate formats that are accessible. So like I mentioned, the machines provide accessible voting experiences, but what if the machine can't provide that for you? Maybe you have a certain type of disability that a machine can't accommodate, such as if you read Braille and you are also deaf. You would not be able to vote on a machine, right? You would need an actual Braille ballot. And you can request that kind of ballot from your clerk. But if you need that, I would suggest requesting it at least 5 weeks in advance so that they have time to get the ballot developed. And then Peg, who's going to talk a little bit in a second, she may know better details about that. I'll let her speak to that if I'm incorrect on that time frame. And then a new rule we have, and I'm really excited about this rule. This just happened last year. If you have a disability, you can now vote online using your assistive technology on your own computer. You do have to have access to a printer. You don't necessarily have to have the printer in your own home. You can get the PDF, you can save your ballot on, say, like a flash drive and go somewhere where there is a printer, if that's how you would rather do it. But you do need access to the printer so you can print your ballot out, as well as the application for that ballot that you sign. You need to print all of that out, mail it in to the clerk's office. You can use your own personal envelope to mail it in. Or you can use the envelope that you get automatically with your mail ballot. If you do use that mail ballot envelope that you get automatically, you need to sign the outside of it. You don't have to do that though with the plain envelope. And I'm gonna try to share my screen so y'all can see what that process looks like. So hold on, I have the. Here we go. We're going to take you to the Secretary of State's website. Okay, so here is the Secretary of State's website, and that's where you would go to get basically all your information that you could, you're curious about when it comes to voting, registering. It's all here. So if you're interested in this online process, you'll want to go to their website, to Elections and Voting, and then scroll down and you will see this little icon, which is our universal icon for accessible anything, parking, voting. So you'll want to click on that, and then it will walk you through the process. So how do I vote my electronic ballot? You can go to this here, and it's going to tell you what your options are. You couldn't do it now. The electronic ballots come out 22 days before Election Day, and based on, I tried to add this up the other day, I think that means October 13th. So your ballot's not going to be ready yet to vote, but you can view a sample ballot. And I'll show you how that works. I did this yesterday, so let's see if I can do it again. I'll put mine in so I can see my sample ballot. And just try not to see how old I am here when I punch this in, because I was like, oh my God, I was born in the 60s. I'm so old. Okay. All right. And then I live in Boulder County. So I'm going to click on Boulder. And then what happens is my sample ballot pops up, and it really looks just a lot like the official ballot, to be honest. Which is a great way to practice voting. So if you want to go on here and just start voting for people, I don't know. That's a lot of people running for president right there. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was the case. But see, you can do whatever. You can even do a write-in. You just click on whatever like that. Write in your candidate. I'll put in my sister. Lives in DC, so there's no way she would be able to do that. But anyway, so you can go all the way to the end. It takes you through, it looks like pretty much everything. And see, I live in Louisville, so I get all the Louisville stuff. So every ballot is different depending on where you live. You'll have different laws that they're trying to pass. And you'll want to read through all of those very carefully, because like I mentioned before, it impacts you in so many ways, and what your services look like. Do you have the money to fund the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, which is very important to me right now, because my son, who's now 18, transitioning into adulthood, I want to make sure he has supports to become employed in a competitive and integrated environment. And I think that services like that are important for people, young adults, transitioning into the workforce so that they can be independent and integrated. And then it has here, you can print your sample ballot, which I'm not going to do that. And I'll just go back and click out of this because I'm not going to do the online ballot. I'll probably I'll probably vote in person because I like to check and make sure that the machines are working and everybody understands that, you know, the accessible machine is very important, and not to not be able to operate them, because that's been a complaint in the past. So that's the online system. Are there any questions about any of this I just talked about?
So this is Elena again. We do have a question about registering for the selective service. So is it correct that when a male registers to vote, it automatically registers him with the military? Since my son is disabled, I will need to act as his legal guardian. Do I need to act as his legal guardian, provide proof from a doctor, or any other kind of documentation that shows that this individual doesn't need to register for the selective service?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I just had that happen to my son. So apparently you don't automatically get registered with selective service, because my son did register to vote when he got his driver's license. And then we got something in the mail like last week that said, you have not registered, you have not joined, whatever it's called, signed up for selective service. This could be, you know, this could be a federal offense. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you better do this. So I know the answer to the first question is no, it's not automatic. I don't know how you would work with the military over getting the doctor's note to that person. And if anybody else on the panel knows the answer to that question, I would gladly defer to that person. Does anybody want to take that up right now?
They do have to register with the selective service. From that, then they will make the decision once they've registered. If we ever go back into a draft situation, they would not qualify to be drafted.
All right, cool. Thanks, Luke. Good to know. Is that the only question for right now?
That was the one. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Oh shoot, let me see what's going on with my button here. Okay, so registration. So to register to vote in Colorado, you will have needed to live here for 22 days prior to the election. There's no restriction on living in a certain county for so many days. It's just anywhere in Colorado that day. If you move the day before from Jefferson County to Denver, and it's like, but you've lived here in Colorado for 22 days, you can still vote in Denver. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but you can, so you don't, there's not like a 22-day deadline timeline on the county you live in to vote in that county, just the entire state. You can also register to vote up and until election day. So please don't do that, because last minute, anything could go wrong here in 2020. You wait till the last minute to vote. But if that happens, we can do that here in Colorado. Very unique to Colorado too. I mean, there are other states that allow that, but not many. If you register by mail or online, you want to do that 8 days prior to the election. So that way you can get a mail ballot delivered to you in time so that you can return it without having to go in person to get your ballot. So if you want it delivered by mail or online to you, please do this 8 days before election. Another cool thing about Colorado is we can pre-register at 16 years old. Like I mentioned before, my son, when he went and got his driver's license when he was about 17, he was able to register, even though at the time he couldn't vote in an election. He's pre-registered, and then by the time he turns 18, he's able to vote in a general election. And there's another new rule also about people who are 17 and voting in primaries. I'll talk a little bit about in a second. So if you want to register online, you'll go to govotecolorado.com, which is easily found under the Secretary website, the Secretary of State's website that I just took you to. It's right there. You can register. You can get a PDF form printed. If you don't have a driver's license or state ID, you'll have to get the PDF form. You won't be able to register online because you do need that information to online register. But if not, you can print that out and then mail it or fax it or email it back to your clerk. And Department of Motor Vehicles, like I said, will register you, and they should be asking you if you want to register if you go there. Any state agency providing public assistance should be asking people if they would like to register. And you can get registered at your voting service and polling center or through a voter registration drive. So voter registration drives are people that are anointed through training to collect registration names to register. So they can do it outside of King Supers, or you'll see them, in various places, maybe at certain outreach events, and those are perfectly legit ways to register. So once you've registered, then you can go vote. So, and as I've talked about before, there's so many different ways here in Colorado to vote. You can do it by mail. So just fill out your mail ballot. You can return that through the U.S. Post Office or a mail ballot drop box. So mail ballot drop boxes are pretty convenient. It may depend on what county you're in, but the more heavily populated counties have a lot of drop boxes available, so it shouldn't be too hard to find one. You can find out where they are on the Secretary of State's website. You can also go to justvotecolorado.org, which is a nonprofit election protection organization that updates the locations of drop boxes and voting service and polling centers for people. So it's pretty easy to navigate and find where the closest place to you is. And also, like I mentioned, you've got 2 weeks before Election Day to vote. I strongly encourage people to take advantage of that because you never know what could go wrong, right? We want to make sure everyone's votes gets counted and cast, and waiting to the last minute could be a problem. You just never know. All registered voters receive a mail ballot at least 8 days prior to the election. I believe that mail ballots are going out this year on October 9th. So you should be getting a mail ballot. If you're registered, you should be getting one anytime after October 9th. And then you can go ahead and mark your ballot and find the mail ballot drop box or put it in the post office if you want to. So voting in primaries here in Colorado has changed in the past couple of years. We now are allowing people who are unaffiliated to vote in a primary, which is really cool. So more people get to participate in that process. We do want to warn people, if you are not affiliated or if you have not chosen a party temporarily to affiliate with, you will get 2 ballots. You will get both parties' ballots. You get a Democratic ballot and a Republican. You don't want to vote both, because if you do both, they won't count. So just remember that. Only vote one of the primary ballots. And I mentioned also we have this new law in Colorado that allows the 17-year-old to vote in primaries as long as they will be 18 by Election Day, which I think is really cool. We really are doing a great job here in Colorado of eliminating barriers and encouraging people to get out and participate in our elections. So we do require some types of voter identification, so ID, if you vote at the polls. Fortunately, we don't require photo ID because it's more difficult. And I say fortunately because photo ID can be a little bit more difficult to get for people who are disenfranchised in the past, or maybe they have disabilities and they don't need a driver's license, or they don't want one, or they can't get to the DMV or have time to spend at the DMV to get these photo IDs, because that's where you would have to go. You would need to go get a state photo ID or driver's license, basically. So we do have other acceptable forms, which I've listed here for y'all. So you can just, if you need to look through it and see if you have any of these forms, most people do. I would say the least restrictive form would be a utility bill, something with your address on it that you can show when you go vote. You can use a Medicaid card or Medicare card, and those that doesn't even have an address on it. It's just a card with a number. So those are all, but it's acceptable. If you're a student in college, you can use your student ID. If you live in a group home or a residential facility, the verification from the administrator of that place is enough ID for a person to vote. So just to verify, yes, this person lives here, that should be enough to signify that that's their ID. If someone is committed to the Department of Human Services, that would be something like our mental health hospitals, CMHIP in Pueblo or Fort Logan here in Denver. If someone is a resident of one of those hospitals, again, verification is enough of ID for that person to vote. And then if someone is in jail, correspondence from the county sheriff to the clerk should be enough ID indicating that the voter is confined in the jail, but the voter can still vote and register as well. So I wanted just to go over a little bit about becoming the election judge. If you're interested in earning a little extra money, this is a great way to participate in our election process. And I don't think the pay is terrible. I think it fluctuates on what county you live in, but I think they pay pretty well. And again, Peg knows more about that for sure. And I don't even know how it's going right now. I don't know if they're having a hard time finding election judges because people might be a little hesitant to go, be in person around other voters, or if they're desperate for election workers. I don't know, but I did look at my clerk's website and it looks like they are not looking for election judges right now, but they're looking for other types of workers in the election process, like ballot counting and things like that. So there's all kinds of, different things you could do. So I would encourage everyone to look into that if you need a little extra cash, and I think it would be fun. And we want to have the voices of people with disabilities. I'm sorry, my phone's ringing. I didn't think to mute my office phone. Let's see. You can be a student election judge. So if you're 16, you can still be an election judge. I didn't know this until a few years ago. I thought that was a really cool thing we do in Colorado. If any of y'all out there in high school, please think about this. I think it would be really fun and something cool to talk about with your friends, and maybe get your friends to do it with you. We need as many people, young people involved, because we want everyone to be excited to vote for the rest of their lives, right? And then you can become an election watcher. That's somebody who actually has access to the inside the polling service, the voting service and polling center. You can go in, you can watch what's going on. Depending on what kind of training you go through, you could have access to actually some confidential information, but then if you don't feel comfortable with that, or if you can't do that type of training, you can have access to just more general information that's going on around you. And poll monitors also have an interesting job. They sort of watch what's going on around the polling center on the outside, and that's another thing you could do to help out in an election, just to make sure people aren't doing what we call electioneering, which is talking about their candidate and telling people to vote for this person. There's a rule against doing that. So several or 100 yards or 100 feet outside the election center. So you can keep an eye on that kind of stuff. So I don't know if there's any questions yet, but I was just going to bring up these scenarios, and maybe people could put in the question and answer box the answer, and we'll see if any of this is hitting home or not. So this is Mary. She moved to a nursing home last year and has not updated her address. Can she vote? And Elena, I guess just let me know if you see anybody answering that question. If not, I'll tell you the answer.
I think you might have us stumped, Jennifer.
I doubt that. So yes, she can update her address up until election day and cast her vote, even if she needs assistance to do so. And that reminds me of a situation. Say somebody does go move into a facility due to maybe some health issues, and they don't consider that facility, the county where that facility is, they don't consider that their home. They can still vote the ballot from the county they had to move from. They would just need to update their registration to reflect that their mailing address is now this facility in a new county, but they want their residential address, their ballot, to reflect the previous county that they left. So you can still vote that county that you consider your home. You're not stuck with voting the county that you had to go move to because of some, health issues. So this is John. He has developmental disabilities and has a guardian. Is he allowed to vote? I wish I had an interactive screen. Y'all could just type it up there.
We've got several yeses in the chat.
Oh, good. Yay. I'm so glad that one came through. Awesome. Yes, indeed. He can vote. Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't. And if they do, you just call me. This is Jane. She is blind and cannot read the mail ballot. Can she vote?
Many more enthusiastic yeses in the chat.
Oh, yay. Of course. And she's got several options here. Like I mentioned before, you can get a mail ballot, you can get a Braille ballot. You can vote online, or you can go down to your voting service and polling center and vote in person. And a lot of people like voting in person. They just feel like that's the patriotic thing to do. So, and then just to wrap it up, here are some complaints that we will see usually especially during a big election year like this year. We will still get a few calls on some architectural and physical barriers. We've had complaints where the voting service and polling center put some traffic cones in the middle of the accessible ramps onto the sidewalk, which, obviously that's doesn't make sense if you know what the accessible ramp is for. So, things like that just don't make a lot of sense. With a quick phone call can be quickly remedied. We get complaints on the inaccessible voting machine issue. It's not set up, or the election judge may not know how to operate it. And we've had some issues with discriminatory attitudes, where people assume that this person shouldn't vote, or they assume the person doesn't need the accessible machine because the person isn't disclosing exactly what their disability is. You do not have to disclose what your disability is to use the accessible machine, but an election judge can ask if you need it because of a disability. So there's this, there's a limit to the amount of information that needs to be disclosed in that situation. So just keep that in mind. So if you do feel like your rights have been violated, or if you were disenfranchised at all, please contact my office. And I have my information at the end. Here's some more of the information, with websites that you can reach out to get more information. Like I mentioned, the voting service and polling center location, mail ballot drop box location at justvotecolorado.org, govotecolorado.com to register, and then your accessible online ballot is at the Secretary of State's main website page, which you can navigate and get to that. So here is my information, and I think I'm going to put some information also into the Q&A. Isn't that what I was supposed to do? Kim, I think, told me I need to do that.
So we'll make sure we get all of our contact information, into the chat before the end of the presentation, and we'll also get that sent out to everybody via email with some extra resources afterwards.
Awesome. So are there any other questions that I would like, need to answer right now, or?
Yeah, so I know some of this is going to be addressed by Peg when we get to the panel Q&A, but I'll put these questions out there, and anybody who wants to respond, please feel free. So we have some questions about voting by mail. So just to reiterate, when I get the ballot in the mail, can I vote by mail? Because the news said I had to vote in person, and I don't feel safe enough to vote in person. So maybe if you could just comment on some of the messages that folks may have been hearing and what is and isn't true.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yes, you can. I would think they would be encouraging voting by mail. I mean, our state has been doing vote by mail for years, even beyond the 2000, prior to 2013. We had a pretty good process in place because we were allowing people to vote by mail anyway. Just now, everybody gets a mail ballot no matter what. So our process is safe, and I think if you want to do that, you should. If you want to go in person, you can still do that too. We're not closing down voting service and polling centers unless there's an outbreak. Then there could be closures. But if there are, there should be some backup places to go. So just keep that in mind too. For anybody out there that wants to vote in person and use a machine, you still have that option as well.
And then if you don't mind reiterating, what is the deadline to have the mail-in ballot turned in?
So if you want, the deadline to register to get a mail ballot is going to be 8 days before the election, which of course I do not have that memorized. I should probably have done that, and I'm sure Peg knows it off the top of her head. Oh, and I said November 6th for the election. I meant November 3rd. Sorry about that. That's Tuesday, election day. So 8 days before that, you should register and you'll get your mail ballot in time to turn it in. You may not have it in time to actually mail it back in. I don't know if I would trust the Postal Service to get it to the election office on time, but you should have time to drop it in a drop box or turn it into a voting service and polling center. And just also keep in mind, it does have to be in by 7 o'clock election day, which is November 3rd is election day. So 7 o'clock, November 3rd. Anytime after that, it won't be counted.
Thank you. One more question about mail-in ballots. How many stamps do you need to put on a mail-in ballot if you're sending it through the U.S. Post Office?
I don't know. That's why I wish we didn't have to do. That's why I don't ever use the postal because it's too confusing. And it's going to be a good question for Peg.
So it varies a little bit by county, just because everybody's ballot might be a little different length. You might have a lot of cities who have different ballot measures or something on the ballot. But the important thing to know is if you put one stamp on your ballot, so a basic one-page ballot is one stamp. If you put one stamp on your ballot and for some reason, technically your ballot would require 15 more extra cents of postage. By state and federal law, the post office delivers all of those ballots to us at the counties, and we have a postage due account where we will pay the extra 15 cents. So you don't need to worry about whether your ballot is a one stamp or a two stamp or what it is, because we will pay the extra postage if it's over one stamp. So what I would recommend is everybody, if you are going to use the mail, to use one stamp, and then we will cover the extra 10 cents, because it's usually not fully 2 stamps worth. It might just be a little bit more, and we'll take care of it.
Thank you so much, everybody. If you're not familiar, that is our featured guest, Peg Perl, Deputy Director of Elections for Arapahoe County. Thank you, Peg. Couple more questions. Again, these might be Peg questions for the panel. But how do I find out where my polling place is?
So yeah, you can go to the Secretary of State's website. You can go to justvotecolorado.org, and then I'm sure the clerks have all of their websites up and ready to give updated information. So.
Yeah, the important thing is that your polling site is where you want it to be in your county. You're not assigned to just one place. So you can look at the list of places in your county and decide what works best for you if you have to go in person for some reason.
Fabulous. And then last question, and then we'll transition to the formal Q&A. If you're in line to vote and it's 7 p.m., and I assume that means on election day, what happens?
You still get to vote. As long as you're there in line waiting, then you should be able to vote. If not, that's a problem. And you would want to call the Just Vote Election Protection Hotline, or maybe your clerk. Usually the clerks are really quick to fix situations like that if something looks like it's going wrong. So. Oh.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We appreciate that. And thank you all for your questions. Great questions, very informative. So now we will transition to our panel of experts, and you'll have opportunities to ask more questions, and you'll also get to hear about some of the services they provide. So I gave you the mini introduction already, but I would like to introduce Peg Perl, who's the Director of Elections for Arapahoe County in Colorado. Peg uses she, her, hers pronouns. I'd also like to introduce Kim Tenure, who is the Associate Director of IDD Policy at Developmental Pathways. Kim uses she, her, hers pronouns. And Luke Wheeland, who is the Director of Community Outreach, Education, and Communication for the ARC of Arapahoe and Douglas counties. Luke uses he, him, his pronouns. So I will turn it over to our panelists to give you a little bit more information on the services they offer and how you might be able to get connected.
Luke, do you want to go first?
Sure. Welcome everyone. Again, I'm glad you're all on here. We have 13 counties from across the state here on the call today. So I'm Luke Wheeland. I'm the Director of Community Outreach, Education, Communications at the ARC, Arapahoe and Douglas County in the southern part of the metro area. There are ARCs across the entire state. We have 15 chapters, so we do serve the whole state of Colorado, and we help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, strive and live as independent lives as possible through advocacy from with birth to death. So we can help you out anywhere across the spectrum. If you want more information, I'll put my contact information in the chat, and you can reach out and we can connect you with any of your local ARC chapters. We're really motivated to get the disability world out to vote. It's your right as a U.S. citizen if you're over the age of 18 to vote, like Jennifer talked about. So we're here really to support that right and really work on getting that information out to people that think that people with disabilities can't vote because of their impairments. Kim?
Sure. Thanks. I'm going to also just talk a little bit about what we're doing. My name's Kim Tenure, as Elena said, and I work with Developmental Pathways. Developmental Pathways is one of Colorado's community center boards, and we connect people to federal, state, county, and private funding in Arapahoe, Douglas County, and the city of Aurora. This voting season, we're really prioritizing or focusing on voter engagement, and we want to make sure that all Coloradans get registered, get educated, and make a plan to vote. And so we're partnering with many different organizations in our efforts. In addition to this webinar, I just want to do a quick plug for some of the other upcoming events that we have. We have another webinar tomorrow, so if you're really enjoying this one or you think this would be helpful, please encourage other people, share it on social media to attend tomorrow's webinar. We also have an event on Thursday specifically geared towards IDD professionals like case managers, DSPs, host home providers, to talk more about that kind of line between supporting voting, but also maintaining your professional boundaries. And then we're also going to be meeting weekly through Election Day to talk about how to support you all in this effort and answer any questions that you may have as a self-advocate or individual with disability or supporting somebody with a disability. So please feel free to drop into any of those sessions, and I'll include all that information in our follow-up. Finally, just plug to watch Developmental Pathways website and social media as we continue to support you with more voter education efforts. And I guess, do we want to have Peg go next?
Thanks, Kim. So thanks for having me here. Again, I'm the Director of Elections for Arapahoe County. So while the Secretary of State is in charge of a lot of these statewide rules, your counties are the ones who are actually physically sending you a ballot and are getting back your ballots and counting. So for a lot of the questions that you might have, like where can I drop off my ballot? How do I actually go into a polling center if I want to go in person? What are the hours? You're going to want to probably check directly with your county clerk's website or with the materials that they send you with your ballot. You can get to those. I saw in the chat, there was a link to the Secretary of State's website that lists all of the county clerk's websites. So you can find all of them that way for wherever you are. A couple things I just want to highlight that I already had on my list, and then the questions came and I knew they were going to happen because I've been doing a lot of these, you might imagine, is making sure everyone does know where things are, especially because of health concerns right now. We at Arapahoe County and most other counties, we work closely together. We want to make sure everybody has the right to vote, but also does it in a very safe and healthy way that makes you all feel comfortable. So we want to make sure that you know you have almost the entire month of October to vote. So we are mailing those ballot packets starting October 9th. That same day is when we unlock the 24-hour drop boxes. So across the state, there will be 24-hour drop boxes. They kind of look like a mailbox. You can just go right up to them and put your ballot in. They are watched by a video camera, so they are secure and they have security footage. But any time from October 9th forward is voting. So while Jennifer said you have 2 weeks to vote, you actually have 4 weeks to vote. So you can do it anytime in October once you get that ballot. You can drop it off on a Saturday afternoon, it doesn't matter. We also then do have our vote centers, which open in most counties, well, in all counties. Vote centers will open starting Monday, October 19th. In some counties, you have some availability to do things in person even the week before that. But by October 19th, every county will have at least some vote centers open across the county. And in addition to looking at their website, your ballot, which looks like this, it's going to come in a packet. And inside is going to have a whole list of places. And I'm going to have to turn off my little screen here, but you can see all the places that you can vote are going to be listed on the ballot as well as on the website. So you can go to any of those places in your county. And that will be open Monday through Friday. And then actually Saturday, Halloween, is all day voting. So if you like Halloween and you want to go drop off your ballot in your costume, I am going to do that. I have a voting themed costume, of course. But you can vote on Saturday, Halloween, in person or just dropping off your ballot at any of those drop boxes. Also, to keep you safe, most of the counties, at least in the metro area, we are offering things like drive-through, where you don't even have to get out of your car to drop off your ballot. And we're even doing curbside ballot pickup. So if you don't get your ballot in the mail and you call our office and say, I need another ballot, either it didn't come to me or I forgot to update my address, so it went to my old apartment, you can come pick that up at the curb, not getting out of your car, just like if you were picking up a to-go order from a restaurant. So we have a lot of different ways to get you your ballot and for it to come back to us. And it does have to come back to us by 7 p.m. on election day. So we recommend that if you're going to use the mail, you allow at least 8 days for that ballot to come back in the mail. So we would recommend not mailing it to us after October 25th. Use those 24-hour drop boxes, or at any of the vote centers, they just have a little box out front with a person that you don't have to wait in line. You can just go put it in the box. There's a drop box. That's a great example, Luke. Thank you. So you can just go put it in those. Those will be unlocked 24/7 starting October 9th. So I want to answer your questions for sure, but I wanted to get some of that basic information out there that I know you all are thinking of.
Okay, this is Richard. We did have a couple of good questions come in. The first one is, if someone with a disability needs help to register to vote, are there any programs to help?
Go ahead, Luke. You look like
There
you're
are-
going to answer.
There aren't any necessarily direct programs out there that are, there's Register to Vote Colorado. I mean, it's helping any Coloradoan that needs, wants to register to vote. With the disability part, the ARCs definitely can walk you through some of that process. During non-COVID times, some of us were actually registration locations in the counties where we serve. So if you're an individual or you're a caregiver for someone that needs a little help to understand how to register to vote, feel free to reach out to your local ARC chapter, and we can get you those contacts of where you register, how you register, and what that looks like for them.
And at the county clerk level, we have a voter hotline. Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was just
you
gonna
go
say
ahead.
We have a voter hotline where we can screens, so.
We're going to come out with some short videos encouraging kind of showing the screen similar to what Jennifer did and kind of showing you where you can find the information on Secretary of State's website and kind of what you need to have available. But I would also encourage you to check out with your local ARC chapters and connect with your counties.
Yes, I encourage the local ARC chapters as well, because it's going to probably be more convenient for anyone listening. But just so you know, Disability Law Colorado also has a person here who is a registered voter registration drive entity, and he can assist people with voting and actually turn in your registration for you if you need that kind of assistance.
Okay, thanks. And there's one more question. It's, when would someone need to have a witness sign their ballot?
So am I on mute or unmute? I'm good. So if you need a witness, it's because you're marking the ballot, because you can't sign something maybe, or due to a physical limitation, or something has changed over time where you just can't produce a signature anymore. That would be the time you would need a witness. And the good news about that is, if you do have signature deterioration, it's changed, or you can't sign, those marks don't go through the signature verification process. So you will not be at risk of having your ballot rejected and then having to go through what they call the cure process of curing that ballot, which puts you then possibly after election day, and then, you know, just risking the chance that it would be maybe not counted if you don't respond in time.
So just to follow up on that, Jennifer, if you are going to have a witness sign because you can't sign your name anymore, then the voter shouldn't even try to sign their name. They should just make an X, because if you try to do anything that looks like a signature, it will go through the signature verification process, even if there's a witness there. That's just the way that the state law is written. So we do collect signatures over time. So if somebody does have changes in their signature, we collect them and we compare it to the most recent signature. So there's no reason why your signature has to look the same now as it did 20 years ago. It would still be accepted. But if you are really at the point where you just cannot sign anymore in a reliable way, then what you should do is just stop trying and just make an X, which shows you're not even trying to do signatures anymore, and you have the witness sign instead. And that moves you into that other category where you're no longer part of the signature verification comparison process.
Okay, thanks. That was all the questions for now, the Q&A.
We've still got 10 minutes, so if anyone else wants to ask questions or say anything else, we still have time.
I did notice that a couple of participants had their hands raised. One was from a while ago, and it was from Jazzy. If you're still there, I could allow you to talk if you still have a question. If you're not at a place where you can type. So I'll turn on your mic here. If you have a question, feel free to ask.
It looks like you're still on mute. But
Yeah, technology. It's not letting me unmute. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Jazzy. If you're able to ask the question in the Q&A session or through chat, please do.
I was going to add on to that signature issue. If someone wanted to not do the mark, maybe they don't want to have a witness or something, you can also use a signature stamp, but that does still go through the verification process, but still it would change over time because it's a stamp that you would use on your registration. And then again, when you mark your ballot. So that's another way if your disability prevents you from being able to do anything really, or you don't want to have to find a witness to be with you when you mark your ballot. Another option.
There were a couple questions in the chat about kind of voter education, and so I just wanted to call out some resources. Kaylee from Advocacy Denver mentioned that Advocacy Denver will be releasing an easy-to-read guide, the statewide Colorado ballot measures. Developmental Pathways is also working on something similar, so I'm excited that there will be lots of resources out here for the community. Those ballot measures can be really confusing for any typical individual and neurotypical individual, and so we want to make sure that we empower everyone to vote, whether you're neurotypical or have a disability or any other sort of diverse abilities that we're supporting in the community. So watch for that from Advocacy Denver, watch for information from Developmental Pathways. So just kind of a plug for some of those activities.
We did get another question just now. It says, who are the primaries in Aurora that are running right now?
That's a big question. There are a lot. It really depends on kind of where you live. So that sample ballot's probably going to be the best solution to give you an easy idea of what congressional district you're in, statewide, locally, and it'll show you not only all the candidates running from president all the way down to county clerk, but also into what initiatives statewide and locally you are on your ballot.
So Aurora is a really good example of a lot of people think of themselves as they live in a city like Aurora, but because elections are run by counties, there's actually 3 different counties in the city of Aurora. There's Arapahoe County where I work, and then there's also parts of the city are in Adams County and parts are in Douglas. So depending on where you live in Aurora, you'll get a ballot from one of possibly 3 different governments, and returning it might seem a little complicated that way because it's not just all the city of Aurora. So there's 2 things I want to point out for that. The first is if you're just trying to return your ballot into one of those drop boxes, like what Luke showed you on the screen, in Aurora, Arapahoe County and Adams County, we have a lot of shared drop boxes. If you put it in that box, my office and their office, we sort the ballots and we make sure that everybody has them in the correct place before the deadline. So you don't have to worry about that as a voter. If you accidentally think you maybe put it in an Arapahoe County box and you technically live out in line in Adams County. Where it makes more of a difference is if you're someone who wants to go vote in person at a vote center during those 2 weeks that we have been open. Because under state law, if you come in person, we can't give you your whole ballot unless you live in our county. We can only give you what's called a statewide ballot. So it's more important for you to know which side of the county line you live on if you are in a city like Aurora that crosses those boundaries, if you're going to go in person. So that's just something to pay attention to, and you might want to double check, again, the website, or putting your address into that Secretary of State's website will tell you which side of the line you live on.
Thank you. It looks like in this case, it is Arapahoe County. So your jurisdiction. And then we did get another question. It says, do you have advice for people who might feel strongly about voting for candidates, but are overwhelmed by some of the other ballot measures? i.e., is it okay to not complete the entire ballot?
I will say from an elections perspective, we count everything you vote for, and if part of the ballot is blank, it doesn't throw away the rest of your vote. So from a counting perspective, if you only vote for half your ballot, we will count half of it. It's not all or nothing. So you don't have to worry about that. If you leave something blank, you've accidentally voided your whole ballot. There's an advocacy reason why you might want to learn about them that I'll let someone else talk about.
You absolutely don't need to, as Peg's mentioned, you don't need to complete your whole ballot. If, as one of the reasons that we're doing these weekly conversations is really to encourage people to get educated upon the issues so that they feel empowered to vote on their whole ballot. We don't want voting and elections to be something overwhelming, anxiety driven, especially in a really, kind of conflict time period, right? So that's one of the reasons we're doing this weekly voting education kind of Q&A section. Or session, excuse me. We're Developmental Pathways is a 501c3 organization, which means we're not going to take positions on any candidates. And as of now, we're not taking any position on ballot measures. So we really want to make sure that we just educate you and give you the pros, cons. So that weekly kind of Q&A session could be an opportunity for you to say, hey, can you help me find the resources so I understand this information? And this is also another great reason to watch for some of the information that Developmental Pathways might be putting out, your local ARC chapter, ARC of Arapahoe and Douglas, Advocacy Denver, the ARC of Aurora might also be putting out to better understand some of these issues. They're also 501c3 organizations, so they're not going to take positions on candidates, and they're just going to kind of give you the education that you need to understand the issues. And I didn't mean to speak for the ARCs, Luke, so jump in if I was wrong.
No, you're fine. Yeah, we're in the same boat as a nonprofit, but here to educate and work through not only the ballot, but then all the candidates that are running. So, we reached out to every candidate running in Arapahoe and Douglas County, asking them to submit a video, a 2-minute selfie video of why people with disabilities should vote for them. As those candidates return those videos, depending on their participation, they'll be posted to our Facebook site, or posted to theirs and tagging us, depending on how they want to release that video. So if you have a candidate that you're questionable about and you want to learn what their stance might be on people with disabilities, if they return a video to us, then you can at least hear from them directly. We also encourage you to reach out to the candidates themselves. They all have different ways of communicating with you that you are open to asking them questions about things that matter to you and your family. So.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Luke, to have people reach out to their representatives and their concerns are. There were disability rights advocates that reached out to Corey Gardner about a year or so ago over Medicaid benefits, and it really had an impact. And I think it, made an impression on him, impacted the way he would vote on a certain bill in Congress. So I think your voice does get heard. You just have to make sure you reach out and participate.
The benefit of reaching out to a candidate too is if they win office, then you already have talked to them once, so it gets easier to talk to them again. So That's a really good point, Luke.
I just want to put a quick plug in for people who want to know more about, we haven't talked much about the counting process of your ballot and how you can make sure that your ballot has been received and counted. We talked a little about the signature verification step. We have in Arapahoe County for a number of years something called Ballot Track. This year it's actually statewide. So everybody who's a registered voter who can put in like an email address or a cell phone number just for purposes of getting notifications, can get notifications of when their ballot goes through the process so that you know it was received after it went through the mail, or you know it was received when it came through a drop box. And so I recommend everybody do that. It's called Ballot Track. You can get to it through the county, through the Colorado Secretary of State's website. You might have already gotten an email saying that you've been signed up for it when it was launched, if you are already registered with an email address. But if not, you can sign yourself up with your county or with the Secretary of State. So I highly recommend that. And then also on your county clerk's websites, usually like ours and others, we have a video tour or some other sort of cartoon video or something that usually explains the whole process of how we review and count ballots. And I recommend everybody watch one of those just so that you understand more about the process of what we do with those ballots between when you finish voting and when we declare how many votes each candidate has.
That's a great thing with, you know, the news these right now of what, you know, elections might look like this year. Tracking your ballot is a great suggestion. We definitely highly recommend that you know where your ballot was counted and that, you know, your voice was heard. That's the whole point of our voting process. Also, if any individual, if you're struggling to remember if you are registered, if you were registered in the past, where, on that county, on the state Secretary of State's website, you can enter some information and they will actually tell you if you've registered before, where your last county of residency was. So you can go in and update that to make sure you're registered currently in the right location.
Okay, I turn my video back on. I think we're at time here. We don't have any more questions in the Q&A. So I think we can wrap things up. I want to thank everybody for attending, and thank you to the panel. This is so informative. A lot of good information, and there's so much information that we'll put a plug in for our second session tomorrow at 4 p.m. if you want to join again, or if you know anybody who missed, please encourage them to attend tomorrow.
And I will share a screen quickly with everybody's contact information if anybody wants to take a picture or a screen capture. And again, we'll have this email or this information available to you via email as well with some additional resources. Okay, so once again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank our partner organizations, Alliance, Disability Law Colorado, the ARC of Arapahoe and Douglas counties, and the Arapahoe County Clerk's Office. Thank you so much for joining us for this important event. Any final thoughts from any of the panelists or any other events or resources that you want to be sure to plug before we sign off?
The last thing is just if you have any more questions or anything else that comes up, please tune into there'll be Wednesday evenings for our kind of office hours or question and answer hours that we can get into a little more specifics around your local county maybe, or an actual resource that you can access directly if you're having a question about your local election or the statewide or the national elections. So tune into those if you have any more questions.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone. I want to especially thank everybody watching for exercising your right to vote, for getting informed, and for learning about how we can all support each other and make our voices heard through the voting process. So thank you so much. Take good care.